All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi, Sable. Oh my god. What the hell? How's everyone doing today? Man, it's actually getting a little bit cold here, but it's okay. I've been having a little bit of trouble getting some decent sleep, but I'm doing all right. Gotten enough sleep for today. We'll be rocking through. We're doing, as we have now established, we're going to do one chapter each week. So we're going to do chapter 5 today? 5 or 6? I think 5. So yeah, I'm gonna do that today. Probably some Genshin. I still need to finish the event and do some other things. Yeah, 5. The Queen, the Saint, and the Sound of Drums. I am very curious on where this book is going now with what we learned at the end of the chapter. Yikes. Yikes. Yippee! Yippee!
Then he waddled away, waddle, waddle.
All right, give me 1 second. How are you doing, Sable? Oh, wait, what? Let me do this. No, wait, that's the wrong thing. I literally just need this. Oh my god. And then we need to just go here. And oh wait, no. Press the wrong button. Changing the fucking video for the music. There we go. That's fine. All right. Yeah, I'm excited to see where the book is going. This book has been super amazing, and I think the pace we're going through now with one chapter a week is very nice. We're gonna like keep them light, keep them concise. We can I can upload them to YouTube pretty quickly, do all that kind of stuff for everybody available, and then we have time for other things as well. We can game, we can chat. Or like last week, we're just gonna have a full-on fucking karaoke party here where I sing like fucking 7 songs or something. I don't know. So we'll see what happens today. I'm definitely gonna be down. We're definitely gonna be doing some Genshin. We're definitely maybe doing some Honkai, depending on how long I need on Genshin. All that good stuff, and then I don't know. hopefully as well over the next few days I can get better sleep, and then we'll be doing a lot of things throughout the week. I really want to get back on Persona Strikers. I've been saying that for like weeks now and I still haven't gotten back to it. I have some other games I downloaded that I want to try and play. There's also going to be Split Fiction soon, hopefully, with a friend. That's going to be a lot of fun. I don't think we're going to stream the rest of We Were Here, because yeah, we've beaten the game the other day. It's just us gonna be sitting there trying to solve those puzzles, trying to get like the 100% on it, because oh my god, that puzzle we were stuck on yesterday for so long, I cannot. I don't like, we are literally just sitting on that puzzle all like half the stream or something and just could not figure it out. I don't think you guys really want to watch me and him just like sitting there and contemplating our life choices as to why we're doing this. I don't know. Or maybe we do. But yeah, like Split Fiction is definitely going to be on the list. Monster Hunter I haven't done in a while as well. There's still some content that I haven't played that I really should do, so maybe we'll hop on some Monster Hunter this week as well, or this coming week. Yeah, lots of little exciting things. Hopefully we can get some shit done. I really want to get back on track because I have been slacking throughout the week. I've been keeping up with the reading streams, but throughout the week, so I kind of like, Let's stop by, of course. Hey, no worries, Sable. I hope so too. I hope you can get some Wi-Fi soon, and then you can actually watch the people you want to watch again and enjoy your time. I appreciate you stopping by even on the low data and saying hi. That means a lot already, so take care of that. Hopefully we'll see you around more soon, and hope you're having a good day. Maybe we could play something again as well, because we haven't done that in a while. Whenever you're back on track with good internet.
Emotional damage!
Indeed, indeed.
Oh my god!
Man, it's insane how like the hype was there for Monster Hunter for me on release, but I already basically like I burned through the first 100 hours and got like all the achievements and everything, so I already kind of like burnt myself out pretty quick on it. And I haven't even been on the title update for that much that I really did everything, but I really want to get back on it because I do love the game. I just kind of went in and a little bit too hard in the beginning, I would say. So we're gonna take it a bit slower. Only be 30 minutes, no worries, Oasis. Thank you for stopping by. Yeah, we'll probably be doing Genshin later, so maybe when you wake up, I'm still gonna be live Oasis and you catch me on Genshin or Honkai, who knows. I've been, on Honkai, I've been busy building the new character, Anaxa, for now. It's been doing alright. Apart from my horrendous relic luck, because fuck me, I guess, when it comes to relics. Alex's Eternal Flame, yeah. So Honkai recently had an event going on where for I think it was 21 runs you will get triple the amount of relics of what you would usually get, which on the highest level is you get 2. Just like in Genshin, when you use condensed, you get 2 relics, like 2 5-star relics each run. So with that event going on, you got 6 for the same amount of Trailblaze energy. You got 6 relics instead of 2. I have done all those 21 runs in the same relic domain, in the same for the same relic set for Anaxa, and I might have gotten only like 1 good piece and 2 very mediocre pieces. It's not even funny. So I fucking hate it here. But he's I think he's level 50 now. His light cone is maxed out. Yeah, definitely need to farm more relics. His traces, the talents are basically as far as I can get them right now for level 50 or 60, whatever he is. So that's gonna be more over the time when I level him up higher, which I should be able to do today. I just need to farm his boss. But he's pretty cool. He's actually really fun, but I just didn't expect to get him. But now I really need to lock in and get and hopefully I can get either Rappa or Firefly as well, because that kind of like you know, I now won 2 50-50s in a row with Anaxa and Fugue. So I feel like the game is gonna shoot me in the foot next time again and just make me lose another 50-50. And coming in Honkai, I know the new 2 5-stars we're getting next update are gonna be Hyacinth and Cypher, but I don't know what reruns are gonna run with them. I don't know if they've announced it already. Let me check. Wait, it's 3.0. I guess I can skip 3.3, it seems. Unless I want to try and make my Glaya better. First a cat girl. Yeah. So from what it seems, it's gonna be Hyacinth and the 5-star Herta first half, and then second half is gonna be Cypher and Aglaya. So unless I might like, I am thinking about maybe grabbing the Herta as well, because the Herta is also really good with Anaxa, so I could combine those two. Or I could try and go for either E1 Aglaya for the energy or her light cone for more damage. So that's like, I could either do that, or again, I'll save until Rappa or Firefly are getting a rerun. All the reason to not stop playing it, right? So yeah, But it's crazy. The Herta came out in 3.0 and with Aglaya as well, and they're already getting a rerun. Damn. Yeah, it seems like it's gonna be Herta and like it's Hyacinth, Herta, Cypher, Aglaya. Which, if I want to focus on, like I said, on my break team, I need to either get Firefly or Rappa. But with Anaxa now, I do have the option to also go for Herta. Or, maybe Aglaya's Light Cone or something. I don't know. I haven't fully decided yet on what I want to do, but it's either gonna be like Aglaya, Light Cone, Herta, or Firefly Rappa, one of those. I don't know. It's like I'm not sure. And then there's also Lingsha. Lingsha would be nice. Fei Xiao would be nice. Like, there's still a lot of characters in Honkai that I want as well that I have not that I don't have. So, and then in July is gonna be the Fate collab. Was it June? Like June? I think it was July 11th. It's gonna be the Fate collab. So there's gonna be Archer and Saber. To be fair, we're getting Archer for free, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna pull for Saber. Probably not. Depends on if I can spare some pulls on it or not, because it's a completely separate banner. Kind of like with the Chronicle banner, it seems, where it's like completely separate pity and everything. We'll see. I'm already pretty stable with my Needless, waiting for Miyabi rerun, and Genshin after the Inazuma Banner we're pretty close to being stable. Maybe finally I'll be able to refine my characters in peace instead of leveling new ones all the time. I feel that. I had a point as well where like I was just like upgrading every single new character, and I just dropped all my money and shit, and like all my Mora and all, so it's gonna be nice. Now I could just like focus one character at a time. There's no like pressure for me to really go for new characters and build them. And right now, like I said as well, most of the new characters I don't really care about either. Like, I'm not gonna go for Escoffier, which kind of rules out for me to go for Skirk. I also don't really like Skirk's kit, so I wouldn't even pull for her anyway. Having seen Dahlia's kit now, it also seems just kind of very meh and not really that worth it, so I'm probably even gonna skip on Dahlia, even though he's a 4-star. I'm not even gonna pull on the banners. And then, I mean, I guess it depends on what reruns they're doing on the Skirk banner and Dahlia banner, like the Skirk banner. Because there's like 1 or 2 Natlan characters that I wouldn't mind getting that I don't have yet. Like Chaska and Mualani would be like the only 2 where I feel like I wouldn't mind getting them and building them. Okay, so leaks are currently saying that supposedly It's gonna be Skirk, Emily, Mavuika, and Shenhe. I mean, the only thing I would care in that regard would be Mavuika's weapon. If that's gonna be the case like that. Other leaks say Skirk Sitlali and then Mavuika Yalan. Like, I've seen different things here. But if Mavuika gets a rerun, the only thing I wouldn't mind from that would maybe be Mavuika's weapon for Gaming. Or Emily's weapon, obviously for Emily. But I'm not really into like any kind of rush right now, I guess, when it comes to the Genshin banners. So that's nice. So I have a little bit of time to just save up in both games right now. I could skip the entirety of Honkai's next update if I really want to go for like either Rappa or Firefly, because like my Aglaya team is doing enough right now. I technically don't really need an upgrade on that team specifically. So like Aglaya's Light Cone or Aglaya's like Eidolon aren't like 100% necessary, but obviously they could help. Herta could be an option now with Anaxa, but it's not a need. You can make Anaxa work in different team setups as well. He seems like a very, very versatile character. It's just, I guess, Herta would be one of his best teammates, like 5-star Herta. So much juice in Inazuma banner. It's insane how good it is. Obviously, I need Yai. I think I'll roll another one if I win 50-50. And if I lose it, we shall see what I get. Right. I was thinking about maybe I'll pull a bit on the Chronicle banner. And then it's either Kokomi or C2 Yai. Or like a weapon, either Mistsplitter or Haran would probably be my choice of weapon. Or Stone Thresher. But I think it's either gonna be, it's probably gonna be more Kokomi. I don't know yet. Or none of them. And I'm just gonna chill and not even pull on that banner whatsoever. We shall see. We shall see. All right. Yeah, we're definitely going to be doing Genshin later because I don't know how many days are left on the event actually. Can I just check that real quick? If I win Yai 50-50, what would be a good bet for a second one? I'm thinking Ayaka for Frost carry, but what's your thought? Ayaka is definitely in a better spot now with Escoffier, but she's still pretty good. She's very reliant on Freeze though, and also Shenhe, and like Shenhe Escoffier are kind of like her best teammates right now. and you really want to play her in freeze, and she's very dependent on the enemies being frozen for her burst to really get all her damage out, she's not bad. Not my kind of playstyle, but all like the dash and charge attacking and everything as well. On that, like, Kokomi is a pretty solid healer option. Can also be played in like taser teams and is very versatile in my opinion. I mean, to be fair, even in a good like mono geo team, Ito, what Kokomi is really good for that in heals. Decent Hydra application, especially in her, like when you on-field her with her burst. Her, like, even if you have negative crit rate on her, her damage scales off of her health and her healing scales off of her health, so you kind of just build her health anyway. And even then, like, she does a decent amount of damage and can work pretty well as an on-field like taser Hydra driver. So it would do like Kokomi, Beidou, official, another Hydra or something, like double Hydra with Kokomi on field. Then the damage is actually nothing to scoff at, or it's not bad. And Kokomi is still also a really, really good teammate for Nilou Bloom teams. Like an on-field Kokomi to proc the Bloom is actually pretty solid as well. She has some good use cases in my opinion. And yeah, especially in the Nilou Bloom, you want to have good healing because the Bloom cores do damage yourself. And Kokomi being able to provide the healing as well is just really, really nice. Shouldn't you be using him more? I use him almost every day, Awayas. He's in my Neuvillette team. My Kazuha is basically used every day. Yeah, my Neuvillette team is Neuvillette, Furina, Kazuha, Shilonen. He just doesn't get much on field time, but he's there. All I do with him is skill, plunge, like skill for the grouping and the VV shred, and then I switch off. But he's used like almost every day. Let me see something real quick. Gotta hop on Genshin for a moment here. Just 1 second. I just want to check something real quick. How much longer the event is, how much time I have. And then we're gonna hop onto the book. Yeah, Kazuha has a buffer. Like he doesn't. I don't need a lot of on-field time with him to make good use of him. So I kind of just. He's just there. Is budget Yoimiya possible? I know yours is roided hard, but you should I lose into her? Can I utilize her without heavy investment? You definitely can. For the longest time, Because I only got Yoimiya on her original run. I didn't get her weapon or anything. For the longest time, to be fair, I would say now it's a bit harder due to like power creep, and then Yoimiya also got like heavily affected by that. She's not in the best of spots. But for the longest time, I ran her on a 2-piece Gladiator, 2-piece Crimson Witch with Rust as her weapon, like the 4-star bow Rust. That is her best free option, quote unquote free option. That's like her best budget option, the Rust. So it is possible for sure. I would definitely say Shimenawa's Reminiscence, like the the 4-piece artifact set of Shimenawa's, is very good on her. Definitely her best. So if you can get a 4-piece for that, that can definitely help. And then, like I said, Rust is a good option. There's some, like, even Skyward Harp is pretty good on her if you get that from like a standard banner pole or something. Yeah. Not sure how Skyward compares to Rust, but I feel like they're gonna be like fairly similar. All right, let's see. I have 7 days on that event. Okay. Yeah, no, we'll be doing that today, so. Yeah, no, Skyward Hop is a good option for her. I mean, it's just crit, right? Crit rate and crit damage you get. That's pretty good for her to have. So, why not? Right, here we go. Cause I got my Skyward Harp fairly recently. I think I got it after I got for Yoimiya's weapon. Like after I got Thundering Pulse. So I used Rust. And I think my friend, one of my friends, he recently built his Yoimiya a bit more, and he's also using Rust. Rust is definitely a very good free option. Because of the, like, sure, it's mostly just attack, there's no like crit or anything to it. But especially on R5, I think it's like an 80% normal attack damage bonus or something. It's pretty significant. Since you mostly do normal attacks, that is a pretty hefty boost. Nothing to just ignore. All right, I'll be right back, and then we're gonna be starting with the book. Alright, I'm back. CC or Chiori wants to mono Geo? Most likely. maybe not mono Geo, but you definitely want to have a character on the team that can give you a Geo construct. And most of those work best in mono Geo, so it kind of like one thing leads to another. Because like Ito Chiori works really well, and Ito wants Goro. Goro wants at least 3 Geo, so yeah, already have like a, you know, there's your setup, 3 Geo, and then you could do, well, you can't run Animo because you can't do swirl, like you can't shred the Geo with swirl. So other options could have, like, you can't run Farina with it because you don't have a healer. So what are your options? Zhongli for shielding. Maybe Shilonen can't buff in that team unless she has constellations as well, I think. And she doesn't really work in a mono Geo team for the red shred. So you can't run Shilonen, you can't run Farina, you can't run any Animo buffing. So that kind of just leaves like Zhongli or a shield, because the shield gives it a little bit of a red shred. Ningguang is pretty good, yeah. Viable for an off team, I'm sure, yeah. Like, Chiori's damage is not bad at all. Do you have Chiori? Because I don't think she's going to be on the Chronicle banner, is she? Oh, she is? Okay. I thought she would need at least like another rerun before she gets on there. There. I mean, all of them are solid characters. Like, Inazuma has a very solid roster. That's for sure. Like, if I pull on it and I get a 5-star, I would say like Ito would be my least preferred one, but I wouldn't say no to either of them. Ayaka is also like, Ayaka, Ito are like the only two where like I could go without them, but I wouldn't be totally mad. The rest is solid. To be fair, I don't really need Yoimiya cons. The Yoimiya doesn't really have that many great constellations. See, I wouldn't say no to that because I fucking love Yoimiya, but yeah. Not some mono Geo. I have many Geo options. Any word on Ayato? What would you do with him? Ayato is another case right now where I would say he benefits a lot from having Escoffier. You could do like an Ayato freeze with Escoffier. Otherwise, he could be also run as like the Hydro driver in Bloom teams, like Hyper Blooms or like Needle Bloom. I'm not sure how good Vape Ayato is right now. Forward Vape Ayato, I don't think it's that good. So like he would definitely, like, he benefits from Escoffier as well. And the funniest thing is, unless it changed recently, like maybe now with Marichese, but Ayato's artifact set that was like designed for him when they released it, it's an artifact set that is very ping dependent, and if you have over 50 ping, you can lose out on DPS. You have other options that work pretty well as well, but the set that was designed for him is weirdly dependent on ping due to its mechanic, and the higher the ping, the worse it gets. Kind of want to, like, if I get Ayato, I'm definitely not mad about it. I kind of want to try some things with him. Hi, Crystal. How are you doing? And, like, especially now with Calamity of Enshu, the sword we got from the Sitlali Woven Scroll event. That sword is actually so fucking strong. If you can maintain a shield. It's so fucking strong. Tired, no energy. Aww. I feel that. I'm running on low energy as well, but we can be trucking through it. We got this. We're here. And we're gonna be starting. Oh my god. We're gonna be starting with the book here very soon. Today is gonna be chapter 5. Or put you to sleep. I don't know. Could be either. Either energize you or put you to sleep. I know, I'm boring. Nah. It's nice background noise to have. I do know. I mean, I'm literally just sitting here reading, so I do not blame if people fall asleep to it. It's very relaxing, very chill. So I wouldn't blame you if you fall asleep, Crystal. I'd be glad if you do, so you can get some rest. All right, so chapter 5, the Queen, the Saint, and the Sound of Drums. Send in the ticket to Hoyo. Gotta wait for a few days to see what happens. I hope that, like, that issue you've had is gonna get fixed. Did you have the issue again? Or once you were actually able to get in, it's fine now? Because I remember you telling me you got in, but I don't know if you're still having issues logging in now. It's no longer fine. Oh, that sucks. I'm so sad. I just checked as well, Crystal. The event is about like 7 more days. So hopefully you can get back in at that point. Ooh. Enjoy book. I will. So we are going to White London now. Okay, we haven't been to White London ever since the beginning of the book. And probably the end of last chapter. But yeah, we'll see. The drums began at dawn. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. They sounded across the air, strong and steady as a heartbeat, as if to remind the entire city it was alive, alive, alive. The sound spread from each of the 9 walls that ran like arteries through the body of London. Once those walls had cleaved the city, carved it up. These days, the pale stone was studded with archways, hundreds of open channels that let life flow uninterrupted through the city. Kosika stood at her bedroom window, eyes closed, and listened to the pulse of the drums, while Nasi and the servants flocked around, braiding her hair into her crown and binding her body into layer after layer of ritual white. We'll lurk for a while on mobile, but probably DC in a while. Hey, no worries, Oasis. If you're like, I'm probably still gonna be up when you're gonna be awake, and then on like Genshin or Honkai, so we'll see. She had refused to wear a dress, opting instead for a tunic and a pair of fitted trousers, but she let them settle the long white cloak over her shoulders and pin it with its saint's seal. Kosika brought her fingers to the silver sigil, touching it lightly, as she always did. A reminder that she was not alone, that every step she took was in a legend's wake. The servants stepped back and Kosika swayed a little side to side, watching the white cloak pool and swish across the floor. By the end of the day, she knew it would be red. Whoa. Okay. Ominous. What? Kosika started to smile, but then Nasi poked a pin too hard into her scalp and she hissed. A small feral sound that the other girl simply ignored. You know, muttered Kosika, it is a crime to hurt the queen. Nasi plucked another gem-tipped pin from between her teeth. Then the queen should stand still. Kosika scowled, and Nasi scowled back, the only one bold enough to meet her gaze and hold it. The servants kept their heads bowed. The Ver did too. Even Lark would look away first, but Nasi didn't even blink. And soon, Kosika gave up the contest and turned her attention back to the window. She could feel the city coming to life, could see the streets rippling with motion as every citizen answered the call of the drums. It was a tithing day. The ritual had been her idea, a chance for the city to give thanks. Thanks for the seasons, for their blessing and their cost. And as needs of the city rose, so did the need for the citizens to make their offerings. Now, the drums rang 4 times a year. When winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall, and fall to winter. 4 times a year. But secretly, Kosika loved this one the most. The 3rd tithe. The day when summer gave way to fall. She loved it for the color of the leaves on the trees. A blushing red, a golden yellow, shades she'd only dreamed of when she was small. She loved it for the changing skies and the way they reflected on the silt each morning and each night. She loved it, selfishly, because it was her birthday. A bad omen, her mother had said, to come into the world when the life was going out. But standing in her castle chamber, Kosika hardly felt that she'd been cursed. And while she would never let the occasion of her birth overshadow the importance of the tithe, she still took some secret pleasure in it. This year, more than most. Today, Kosika turned 14, an age that mattered to her in one way and one alone. She'd been on the throne for 7 years. 7 years marked by peace and power, which meant she'd now spend half her life as queen. And every day from this one forward, she could say she ruled longer than she hadn't. That's a young fucking queen to rule over an entire kingdom. Sure, right. Nasi slid the last pin into her hair, and Kosika moved away from the window toward the silver ash tree that grew in the center of her room. Its roots drove down between the stones, its branches up toward the vaulted ceiling, and Kosika stopped before it and touched the bark as if for good luck. Then, only then, did she feel ready. Nazi held out the silver blade, and Kosika fastened it at her hip as the drums echoed on through the city, calling everyone to bleed. The castle doors swung open onto a waiting world. Dozens of royal guards flanked at the pale steps, and halfway down, Kosika saw Lark. He stood out. He always did. Only 17, but already taller than most. His silver blonde head tipped back, dark eyes on the sky instead of the ground. The scar that wrapped like a chain around his throat on full display as it always was. He wore it with such pride. At the base of the stairs, the Ver stood waiting. All 12 members of her council, adorned in their silver half cloaks. Therak at the front, his dark head bowed, his gauze-wrapped hand resting on the saint's seal at his shoulder. Beyond them, the courtyard brimmed with citizens and soldiers, and all those who lingered hoping to catch a glimpse of their queen as she set out to the tithing road. And yet, for a moment, Kosika didn't move. She stood at the top of the castle steps and felt the sigh of morning on her skin, felt the crispness on the air, one season tipping into the next, the balance of it all, and the change. The rise and fall of her breath, and time with the drums, and she felt small and vast at once. A single drop in the silt, and all the water in the world coursing through her veins. She felt beyond the edges of her narrow frame, and knew that she stood in a blessed place, in the center of the current, and let it draw her forward, over the edge, and down the stairs. So Kosika descended, the white cloak rippling around her, as to every side the heads bowed and the voices rose to greet their queen. Now we're jumping 7 years back. The day the world changed, Kosika was trying to take a nap. She and Lark were sitting on top of the Vodka's Mar, the fifth wall, which was her favorite one because it was the highest, and from there she could see the river snaking through the center of the city, and the castle jutting up like a piece of a shattered slate. Usually she'd make a game out of counting market stalls and passing cards, but today she was stretched out along the top of the wall, one arm thrown across her eyes. She was tired, but it was probably because she hadn't gone home, not since the incident with the collectors in her mother's kitchen in the day before. And then Lark poked her at the side. "Yo, have you heard the news?" he said. "The king is dead." And as soon as she heard the words, she just knew that the body she'd found in the silver wood the day before, the man slumped against a tree as if asleep, the one with the grass growing beneath his hands, was the king. She knew it in her bones and in her fingertips where they had touched his, and behind her ribs, an ache like sadness. She'd gone back to the silver wood first thing in the morning. By then, the man's body was gone, but she could still find the right spot, because the grass was still there. More than that, it had spread like a puddle overnight, and she had lain down on it. in it, the tender blades brushing her cheek. She thought of the soldier sobbing. "What happened?" she asked, surprised to find her eyes burning, her voice tight. Lark shrugged. "What always happens to kings, I guess. Someone must have killed him." But Kosika knew that wasn't true. She'd seen him, and those fine-cut clothes, that silver half cloak, and there had been no blood, no wound. He didn't look as if he'd been struck down. He'd looked peaceful, a tired body searching for a moment's rest. "It's going to get bad again," Lark mused, watching as a pair of soldiers passed by below their perch, and he was probably right. It was always bad after someone killed a king. Even if he hadn't been killed and no one came forward to claim they'd done it, there was now an empty throne, and who knew how many people would try to take it? In the end, it would go to the strongest or the most brutal, and either way, it could take a while. Kosika closed her eyes, sadness pooling in her chest. Life had just started to get better. There was warmth in the air. She imagined the cold seeping back in, the magic slipping away again, and shivered. She dug her fingers into the wall, and it was strange, but she swore the stone was humming faintly beneath her hands, and she frowned, pressing her palms flat. "Do you feel that?" she asked, but Lark wasn't listening. He was counting out coins on the wall between them, the profit from the amulets she'd found yesterday morning. The sound of the metal clinking made her stomach turn, but as soon as he was done, Kosika grabbed them. 5 silver tolls, enough to buy bread and cheese and meat for a week. Enough to feed her mother as well, Kosika thought, before she remembered why she'd been in the silver wood. She hadn't told Lark about that. She knew she'd been lucky to start out with a mother, even a bad one. He didn't have anyone, and he'd gotten by. She would too. So Kosika shoved the coins in her pocket, frowning at the way the metal sang against her skin. The silver going warm, almost soft, as if it might melt, and she felt a light dizzy. And when Lark hopped down from the wall and reached back up to help her, she shook her head and said she'd stay a little longer. "Oste," he called her over his shoulder, jogging away. "Oste," she called back. They never planned when or where they would meet again. They didn't have to. He'd come find her, or she'd go find him. Kosika's gaze drifted over the city, and she started counting the boats on the silt. She'd gotten up to 9 before she heard the scream. Her head whipped around. The sound was close enough to make the hair prickle and on the back of her neck, to make her skin tighten and her blood tell her to run. Not toward the trouble, never toward, but as Kosika hopped down from the wall, another scream split the air, and she knew that voice, even though she'd never heard it in that shape, never heard it so full of pain or terror. Lark. She took off in the direction he'd just gone, the same direction of the scream, rounded the corner, the road splitting into 3, and even though the voice bounced off the walls, she knew where it was coming from. Could feel it, like a string drawn taut between them. She took a sharp right, and there was Lark, fighting with all his strength, even though a chain was wrapped around his wrists. He'd always seemed so big to Kosika, so tall. He was so much shorter than the 2 men attacking him, so much smaller than the fist that crashed against his cheek. "No!" she shouted as his body buckled on the street. One of the men turned toward her, and her heart lurched in her chest as she recognized him from her mother's house, the rope tattoo on his left hand, his body all gristle and grease. The collector smiled. Well, he said, a second length of metal hanging from one hand. Behind him, Lark was trying to summon fire, but the chain around his wrist must be cutting it off because his fingers splayed and nothing happened. He tried to get to his feet, but the man shoved Lark back down as the one who'd paid her mother started toward Kosika. "Run!" shouted Lark, and she wasn't proud of it. But Kosika took a single step back before arms came down around her, a third man crushing the air from her lungs and hauling her off her feet. The first was still coming toward her with that chain, and the world was humming, and she didn't so much think as reach for the stone wall and pull it toward her. And to her surprise, it came. A massive piece of the wall listed, leaned, and tore free, crashing down like a wave onto the gristle man, burying him beneath the stone. The arms around her tightened, and she slammed her head back, felt the satisfying crunch of teeth, even as it sent a lancing pain through her own skull. Her vision going black and white for a second before the captor cussed and dropped her. She hit the ground hard, skinning her hands and knees. When she touched the back of her head, her fingers came away red. She was hurt and scared, but there was no time for fear. "You little bitch," said the voice, paired with a scrape of metal, and Kosika twisted her toward the man who'd grabbed her, blood spilling from his broken mouth as he splashed the sword through the air. And she flung her hands out in a useless plea for him to stop. And he did. His whole body jerked to a halt, limbs trembling like a bug stuck in a spider's web. She could feel the bones shivering beneath the skin, could feel the metal in the sword as it turned, tip driving back into his chest, could feel the life leave his body as he fell to the ground. She stared, shaking as she got to her feet. "Kosika." Lark's voice was a hoarse whisper, and she turned and saw him, past a pile of rubble, on his knees, his head wrenched back and a blade against his throat. He made a signal with his bound hands, "Run," but this time her legs didn't betray her. This time, they carried her forward. "You stay right there," ordered the man, his fingers tangled in Lark's silver hair. The blade kissed the boy's throat, drawing a thin line of blood, and Lark winced. And there was fear in his eyes, but his hands were moving again, not signaling now, but reaching, and she realized too late that Lark was reaching for the knife he kept in his boot. It happened so fast. Lark pulled the blade and drove it down into the man's foot. He howled and jerked back, drawing his knife across Lark's throat. "No!" screamed Kosika, running as fast as she could, not for the man who was already fleeing, but for her best friend as he slumped and toppled to the dirty street. She'd always been fast, but the wind was at her back and it pushed her, carrying her toward him with impossible speed. She fell to her knees beside Lark's body as his mouth opened and closed, as his eyelids fluttered and his life spilled out. Too much, too bright. Kosika tore a chain from his wrists and pressed her hands to his wounded throat. "Nas Arik," she pleaded, as the blood slipped between her fingers. "Don't die." "Nas Arik," she whispered again and again, but as she did, the words changed in her mouth. Not the N to a softer H, the end open, a new plea welling up, a word Kosika didn't know, had never said before. "Sorry." Another sound rose up to join it, like a hitching breath. Us, sorry." The strange words spilled out like a chant, and as they did, the blood stopped pouring from Lark's throat. There was so much of it, on him and on her and on the road beneath, but his skin was no longer gray. His body went slack, but it was the kind of relief that came with sleep, not death. Lark's chest rose and fell, and then when she dared to lift her hands from his throat, she saw the gaping wound had closed, leaving only a raised line, like a welt, running from edge to edge across his neck. Kosika let out a sob. Lark's eyelids fluttered and drifted open. He swallowed, and the first thing he said wasn't a question. It's only 2 words, whispered in a tone of wonder. Your eyes. Before she could ask what he meant, she heard the heavy tread of armored boots and looked up to see 2 soldiers, a man and a woman, marching toward them in dark gray plate. What happened here? Demanded the man, and only then was Kosika aware of her surroundings. The city wall half collapsed, a tattooed hand sticking out from the rubble, the body with the sword jutting out from his chest. Lark on the ground, still covered in blood, but not bleeding. Her own hands stained red, her body still humming with fear and relief. Other faces were starting to appear in windows and doorways, studying the scene. On your feet, ordered the woman, and Kosika rose, stepping in front of Lark as she did. She wanted to run, but he couldn't even stand, not yet. And she wouldn't leave him. Besides, she was starting to feel dizzy, as if she was the one who'd lost all that blood. Kosika was still trying to decide what to do when horse hoofs thundered on the stones, and the 3rd soldier arrived, dressed differently from the other 2, clad in silver armor and riding a dark horse, a royal guard. He dismounted and removed his helmet as he took in the scene. Kot he muttered, king's breath, and then louder. Who did this? I did, said Kosika, defiantly meeting the royal guard's eyes. His breath caught, surprise sweeping across his face. She didn't realize one of the previous soldiers had gone away until he returned, hauling the collector who'd slit Lark's throat, the one who'd gotten away. The man was limping, the little knife still stuck in his foot, and babbling on incoherently until the royal guard made a sign, and the gray soldier struck the man hard, so hard he fell to his knees and stayed there. Good, thought Kosika. Yo, CL, what's up? Hope you're having a good day. Good evening. All right, there we go. And she might have gone and kicked him for good measure, but the royal guard turned and knelt in front of her, so they were face to face. The silver armor on his chest was so polished that Kosika could almost make out her reflection in the gleaming metal. Almost, but not quite. Whose blood is that? Asked the royal guard, gesturing to her hands. And Kosika flexed her fingers, the red drying brown on her palms. Most of it was Lark's, but she had touched the back of her head before, hadn't she? Which meant a little must be hers too. She didn't say any of that, only glared at the man on his knees. He cut my friend's throat. She's trying to sleep while having a stream on. I appreciate that. I hope you can get some good rest, man. It is kind of late, so get some good sleep, man. The royal guard didn't look at the collector, didn't look at anyone but Kosika. His hair was pale, his eyes the color of the sky, a watery blue. Good thing you were there to fix it, he said. And there was something in his voice, not anger or kindness. It was wonder. She heard the hiss of steel being released, and then a man on his knees toppled forward, his throat open and blood spilling out onto the street, the way Lark's had minutes before. But no one rushed forward to fix him. And so Kosika watched, satisfied as he died. One of the gray soldiers, the woman, was kneeling next to Lark now, helping him sit up, and Kosika wanted to go to her friend to make sure he was all right, but the royal guard held her still with his gaze. "How long have you had magic?" he asked. And she was about to say that she didn't, that it hadn't arrived yet. But obviously that wasn't true. Not anymore. When she didn't answer, he tried again. "Where's your home?" Kosika chewed her lip. Wasn't about to tell the guard that she no longer had one, that last night she'd slept in an attic with a loose window latch, hoping there weren't mice. She just shook her head, and the royal guard seemed to understand, because instead of pressing her, he said, "My name is Pajorik. What is yours?" That at least she could answer. "Kosika." "Kosika," he repeated, his face breaking into a smile. "Do you know what it means?" She shook her head. She hadn't known a name could mean anything. Her mother told her she was named for the jagged stretch of the Kosik itself, which ran along the city's edge like a wound that wouldn't heal. But the royal guard looked her in the eyes. "It means little queen." He straightened and held out his hand. "You must be tired and hungry, Kosika. Why don't you come with us to the palace?" She tensed, suspecting a trap, wondered if the guard was just another kind of child thief. And Lark must have thought so too, because he was on his feet now, lurching toward them. "Don't go," he shouted hoarsely, but the female soldier grabbed him by his arms and hauled him back, and anger rose in Kosika like a wave as Lark tried weakly to pull free. "Don't hurt him," she said in a feral growl, and the world seemed to echo with her voice. The stones beneath her feet began to tremble, and what was left of the wall began to lean, and a gust of wind whipped against her skin, and the whole alley groaned and splintered. And she didn't hear the bootsteps or see the hilt of the sword until it crashed into the side of her head, and everything stopped. Wow. That's crazy. So I guess that's how Kosika came to her powers. Or discovered that she has those powers. Wow. All right. That was part one. So now part two, we're jumping back to the present. And then now, Kosika would be the last to make her offering. She made her way down the castle steps, and the royal guards fell in stride, trailing like shadows in her wake. She passed the silver-clad Ver at the bottom of the stairs, and then the crowd that lined the path. Merchants and sailors, tailors and bakers, parents with children in their arms, all of them bound together not by their age or dress, but by the bandage wrapped around their palms. Servants stood waiting at the castle gates, their trays piled high with sugar buns for those who had already made their offering. The first of 3 rewards for the first of 3 tithes. A reminder that this was not just a day of sacrifice, but celebration. As Kosika neared the altar on the path, the air took on the copper scent of blood, and the crowd cleared to reveal a statue of a man poised above a shallow basin, the surface shimmering red. The stone figure was larger than life, though folded beneath its weight depicted on his hands and knees. The man's head was bowed beneath an unseen force, his shoulders hunched, his shirt front torn askew, revealing the binding spell once burned into his chest by Athos Dane. Holland's carved stone hands pressed into the bottom of the basin, so that as it filled, the blood rose over his shins and wrists. and made it look like as if he were sinking inch by inch into the pool. Kosika approached, stopping only when she was close enough to look up into Holland Vosik's face. To see the pain in his jaw, the furrow of his brow, the eyes cast in different shades, one pale, the other black, just like her own. First, you were a servant, she said softly to herself. The worlds were not for the crowd, they were private as a prayer. She pulled the silver blade from her hip and drew it across the meat of her forearm. One swift, deep cut. Blood welled and spilled into the waiting pool, rippling the surface. Kosika ran her fingers over the weeping cut and touched them to the collar of the basin. Unlike the rest, this pot was made of frosted glass instead of stone. As steno, she said, and the Antari spell took shape in the world, breathed life into her power. Breathed into life by her power. The surface of the basin rippled like a pulse, and the glass walls shattered. Blood spilled like rain over an awning. It splashed and pooled around Kosika, staining her white clothes. It poured out until the basin, which was no longer a bowl, but a plane of flat stone, was empty, and Holland's hands revealed themselves, stone fingers splayed against the rock. And Kosika stood there, as blood leached up the hem of her white cloak and soaked into the soil of the courtyard, turning it the black of loam. The first tithe was done. Now we're jumping 7 years back again. Sunlight danced across the ceiling. That was the first thing Kosika saw when she woke up. At least, she guessed it was a ceiling, but it was so far away. The stone walls surged up and vaulted overhead. The ground beneath her was too soft to be ground, and too soft to be a bed. Even though that's what it was. A bed so big she could lie in the center, her arms and legs thrown wide, and not come close to reaching the sides. And for a moment, that's what she did. Her mind blissfully blank as she looked up at the light on the ceiling and tried to remember, where had she been? On top of the wall with Lark, staring up at the sky, and then she heard a sound. It was quiet, the soft tap of a pebble hitting stone, and Kosika sat up, wincing at the sudden pain in her head. She touched her temple, and it all came rushing back. The thieves and the struggle, and Larg and the soldiers. And then she was scrambling across the pillowed ground, trying to reach the edge of the bed. "Oh, good," said a voice. "You're awake." Kosika jerked around, found a girl sitting cross-legged in a nearby chair, elbows balanced on her knees. She had fair hair drawn back in a braid and a narrow face covered in scars, as thin and white as seams. On a lower table in front of her was a game board. Half the figures black and gold, the rest silver and white. They mingled on the board, and few lay cast aside as if in the middle of a game. But if she'd been playing, it must have been against herself. "Who are you?" asked Kosika. The sound of a voice made her temple throb, and she reached up and touched her head. "I'm Nazi," said the girl. "If it's any consolation, the soldier who hit you has been arrested." Kosika didn't understand. He'd been struck a dozen times by a dozen people, and no one had so much as said that they were sorry. "If you ask," continued Nazi, "they might even kill him." Kosika winced. She didn't want to kill anyone. "Why did he hit me?" Nazi nodded to the window, as if there was an answer there. So Kosika hopped down from the bed. The jolt of landing sent another spike of pain through her skull. went to the sill and gasped. She wasn't in a house. She was in a castle. The castle. This high up, she could see the grounds and the high stone wall that ringed it. Could trace the 9 smaller walls of the city as if they were chalk lines. Could count every block and square. The carriages were the size of raindrops, the people grains of rice. The silver wood sat the size of her palm at the city's edge, and all of London sprawled beneath her like a toy set or a tapestry. It took her a moment to see it, but then she did. From here, it was small, little more than a patch of shadow, a broken line, a pool of dark. When she brought her hands up, she could cover the whole mark with the tip of one finger. But she knew that up close, it was bad. Part of the vodka smar was missing, and deep cracks ran down the street. It looked like a large hand, like the one she had held up now, had crushed the spot beneath their thumb. Korsica felt a little dizzy, a little sick. Yeah, those bots are annoying. Luckily, my bot just snipes them down immediately. Korsica felt a little dizzy, a little sick. They were scared, explained Nazi, of what you might do if you kept going. Korsica turned. I didn't mean to. The other girl only shrugged and moved another piece on the board. But you did. Korsica's heart began to race, and at the same time, a breeze kicked up in the room, even though the windows were closed. What about Lark? What if they'd hurt him? What if she had? She had to go and had to find her friend. She went to the massive door and pushed and pulled with all her strength, but it didn't move. It's locked, said Nasi, as if it wasn't obvious. So Korsica looked around at the chamber, at the lush tapestries that covered the floor and hung from the walls. The room was big, bigger than her whole house, and made entirely of stone. Are we prisoners? The girl studied the board. I'm not, she said. As for you, maybe. Korsica would learn that Nasi didn't bother with gentle lies. She believed it was always better to know the truth. But, she went on, there are far worse places to be kept. So Nazi held out a bowl of fruit, but Korsica's hand darted forward, quick-fingered before the other girl could pull it away. But Nazi only held it and waited, and Korsica's hand slowed, her eyes searching. She took a plum and bit down, shocked by the sweetness. Nazi took one too. If you want to leave, she said, studying the fruit, I'm really not sure they could stop you. Korsica thought of the destruction in the street below and wondered if the other girl was right. She was about to find out. Turning back to the door, she pressed her hands against it flat and focused. She could feel the wood and the metal, the place where they met, and began to pull and... What are you doing? Asked Nazi. I have to find Lark. Blonde boy? Ventured the other girl. Dark eyes, covered in blood? Korsica rounded on her. You've seen him? Where is he? Last time I checked, he was in the kitchens, eating the ver out of bread and cheese and everything else. Ver? The Royal Guard. That's what they call themselves. Very proud, dressed all in silver. Korsica remembered the pale man who knelt before her. Patrick. Nasi waved her over to the board, and Korsica came. Up close, she saw the pieces were not all the same. They were knights and cloaked figures, children and kings. It's called cold cut, explained the girl, clearing the pieces from the board until there was only a white and silver king. When Holland Vosik took the throne, she said, The Ver were the first to bend their knee, the first to believe that he was the someday king. As she spoke, she added white and silver knights to the board, one by one, until they formed a circle around the king. Korsica counted them, 13. Now the king is dead. Nazir lifted the figure from the center of the circle and set it, almost gently, to the side. And the Ver are trying to hold the peace. But it's only a matter of time before someone comes along to claim the empty throne by force. And they're hoping it won't come to that. Not if you take Holland's place. Korsica reeled. Why me? Well, said Nazi, setting another piece, a child, in the circle. Because you are like him. Antari. Antari. Korsica didn't know that word, and it must have shown on her face because Nazi rose, unfolding her narrow limbs from the chair. She was clearly older than Korsica, but still half-grown. Closer to Lark's age, maybe 9 or 10. Her cheeks full, but her arms and legs thin as if were sprouting up at different rates. Nazi went to a shelf by the bed and lifted a small mirror. She came over and held it up for her to see. Korsica studied her reflection. She was still an in-between girl, with an in-between skin and in-between hair. But only one of her eyes was its usual in-between shade. The other was now black from edge to edge and lid to lid, like someone had poured ink into a socket. Korsica recoiled at the sight, scrubbing furiously if she could clear the stain. But when she pulled her hand away, it was still there. I took that, a rare, said Nazi. It's a mark of magic. The last king had an eye like yours, and he woke up the world. Now you have one, and they think maybe it's a sign. Maybe the magic will keep coming back as long as an Antari stays on the throne. Maybe you can keep the city from plunging into war. Maybe they will look at you and see a good omen, a beacon of change. Or maybe, she went on, they will see a helpless child standing in their way and cut their throat, and cut your throat. So Korsica swallowed, but she couldn't take her eyes from the mirror. She reached out and touched the glass even as her heart thrilled in her chest. What do I have to do? Nothing, Nazi said. Just stay. And stay alive. She handed the mirror off to Korsica. And try not to destroy any more of the city. With that, she went toward the door and knocked 3 times. What are you doing? Letting you know you're awake. Letting them know you're awake. A heavy bolt slid free, and the door swung open into a hallway, and the silver god, a Ver. He looked past Nazi to her, and then sank to one knee, head bowed. Korsica, he said softly, and it took her a moment to realize he was not addressing her by name, but title. Little Queen. Okay, so far, I don't think Korsica is like a bad character in the way of like that she's evil or anything. Considering she also said she doesn't want to kill anyone. Obviously, my first initial thoughts were like, oh, she's from White London. The stigma of White London being like all about like ruling with power and force, and we know like the twin kings we've had before were like absolutely horrendous and evil people. Holland was like a bit more on the gray side, so like there was already a little bit of that going on for me. I was like, Korsica, White London, another Antari, who knows? But so far she seems not evil. But we also have to consider she was 7 years old when she just got taken into that palace. She has now, as she said herself, she has now ruled this land longer than she hadn't. She's 14 now. She had ruled for half her life, and it was her birthday. So at this point, she ruled longer than she hadn't. Power, especially for a child like that. I don't know what it will do to somebody. If you're getting in a position like that at that early age, alone with no family at this point, because you ran away from your mother and you gotten to learn that you're like this all-powerful mage and you rule over an entire world as a 7-year-old? I don't fucking know. We'll see. Anyway, that was part 2. So now we're jumping into part 3, which will now begin again in the present. The sun was high by the time Korsica reached the second station on the pier. Her fingers were sticky with sugar and stained red. She'd eaten the bun on the walk from the castle to the plaza at the river's edge, dusting the last traces of pastry from her palms along with flecks of drying blood. The crowd along the silt was twice as large as in the front of the castle, and twice as boisterous, the mood made bright by the second tide's reward, a steaming cup of cider wine. The drums played on, counting out the city's pulse. But they were joined by other music. Nearby, a woman sat on a rooftop singing a song about the someday king, and merchants sold food to go with the gifted drink. And Korsica's arrival was heralded with cheers and bows, the crowd parting to allow their queen and her guard, then folding it closed again, as if they were a fire, and they hoped to feel her heat. Nazi and 2 of the Veer had yet to make their second tithe, so Korsica stopped to watch and wait. Lark caught her gaze, lifted a cup of wine, and winked. She fought the urge to roll her eyes, even as her cheeks warmed. She wasn't sure why his smile did that to her. She didn't want his attention, not like that. And yet, when he turned that smile on a pretty girl in the crowd, she felt the warmth curdle. "I don't blame you," observed Nazi, wrapping the strip of white cloth around her hand. "He is pleasing to look at." "And you may have him," said Korsica, too fast. "Oh, how kind," said Nazi, "but I prefer your company." Korsica ducked her head to hide her smile. The truth was, she loved them both, always had, but these days, Korsica loved Nazi and Lark with a need that frightened her. A hunger that climbed into her bones and burned there, made her want to hold them close, to bind them to her. She thought of the Danes binding Holland and wondered if it had been an act of hate or necessity, a need to keep him close, to feel them linked. Not that she would ever follow in their footsteps. Then the way was clear, and it was time. Korsica approached the pier and the second altar. This Holland Vosik stood waiting for her, no longer on his knees, but standing upright on a plinth over the water. A polished black crown circled his stone temples, and his two-toned gaze looked straight ahead, at his city, at her. A carved cloak lifted behind him, caught in a permanent breeze, and his boots vanished into the basin at his feet, his reflection rippling in red. "First, you were a servant," Korsica said under her breath. "Then you were a king." Beyond and below, the river glowed. The silt had thawed with Holland's rain, but it still ran pale. Mist clung to the surface, and the water itself emitted a soft, silvery light. Not unlike frost, that Korsica finally understood was not a sign of sickness, but strength. A place where magic gathered, where it flowed. It was the first place to suffer, and the first to heal. Her eyes dropped to the waiting basin. So much sacrifice. And yet, in truth, it was only a few drops from each and every soul in London. We all must bleed a little, she thought, drawing the blade across her skin a second time. A second time, Korsica touched the side of the basin and said the ritual words, and a second time, the walls of the altar shattered and the blood cascaded down into the river below. A moment of deep blooming red before it dissolved into the tide. People stood downstream and watched as the ribbons vanished in the current, but her gaze lingered on the statue, the bottom hem of its cloak dripping blood, just like hers. Korsica turned back to the plaza, where Nazi stood waiting with a cup of cider wine, and she felt the blade sing toward her, the whistle of metal, the glint of steel. Korsica was already drawing the air tight on instinct, the way someone else might suck in a breath, wrapping it into her shield the moment before the dagger struck, and clattered, useless, at her feet. Shouts went up, a strangled cry, and then Nazi was there beside her, her own weapon ready. The Ver drew in like a wall, and then the guards were on the would-be killer, forcing him out on the crowd and onto his knees. He fought until a gauntlet collided with his face, a sword slicing toward his throat. Wait! The excitement had bled out of the plaza, taking the sounds of celebration with it. Only the distant drums beat on, unaware of the incident. So Korsica's voice rang out through the square. Guards stilled. The man fought like a mouse in the grip of a snake. Korsica looked down at the weapon on the pier. It was not the first time someone tried to kill her, and on a saint's day, but she supposed that was the point. There were those who wanted her dead because she was queen, and those who wanted her dead because she was Antari, because they believed the power of Holland's life lay only in his sacrifice. Sure enough, the man was ranting on under his breath. "Och wil nach rest," he said again and again, as soft and swiftly as a prayer. "In death you set us free." Korsica stepped over the blade and crossed the square to the four soldiers, and the man on his knees, his face swelling from the gauntlet blow. And as she neared, she saw that his hands were unwrapped, unmarked. "You have not tithed," she said. The man looked up at her with venom in his eyes. "The world does not want our blood," he hissed. "Only yours." The queen considered her fingers, stained with her offering. "Is that so?" She brought her hand to his shoulder. "Shall we ask the world what it wants from you?" He tried to recoil from her touch, but the guards held him fast. Korsica closed her eyes and waited for the words. That was the way of the Antari spells. They came as she needed them, whispered through her head, and shaped themselves on her lips. So she waited, and the guards waited, and the citizens and soldiers in the square all waited. And the moment drew long and still, and in that stillness, a new word rose to meet her, and she gave it voice. "As Orense," she said, and the spell's meaning echoed through her as she spoke it. Open. A strange spell, and not the one she would have chosen, but it had been chosen for her. And as she said it, the man's eyes went wide and his mouth yawned, and his skin split as if held together by 100 invisible seams that all gave way at once, and his blood poured forth. Not the drops he would have given to the tithe, but all of it. Every crimson ounce came spilling into the pier. He did not scream. No one did. It was London after all. They had seen horrors, and it was horrible, but it was also right. It was the world's answer to the man's claim that only she could bleed. What the fuck? Excuse me, what? I guess my previous statement about her not wanting to kill people can be retracted, because hello? That was unexpected. This man just got fucking cracked open and split in half. Sure. The guards let go, and what was left of the man's body fell like wet rocks into the spreading pool that had been his life. But Korsica would not waste it. She reached out, and the blood rose and flowed in a ribbon across the square over the river's edge, before vanishing into the silt with the rest of the sacrifice. And with that, the second tithe was done. What? Sure. Now we're jumping 6 years back. Korsica held a hand over Nazee's face to make sure she was breathing. She could see the steady rise and fall of the other girl's chest, but it still amazed her the way Nazee slept, as if there was no danger in it. Korsica didn't know how to sleep like that. Her mother used to sleep like a star, her limbs flung out to every side, so if Korsica wanted to join her in a narrow bed, she had to fold herself into the empty spaces, and even then, she only skimmed the surface of sleep. Her skin had always been awake, her ears pricked for trouble. Now and then, she'd sink deep enough to dream, but even those crumbled as soon as her mother stirred. Now, Korsica sat up, 8 years old and wide awake in the massive bed, marveling at Nazee's steady breath, how lost she was to the world. She gave it these testing bounds, but the other girl didn't so much as murmur. She huffed. The least Nazee could do was keep her company. She considered shaking the girl awake, forcing her to play a game of cold cut or tell her a story, but Nazee would probably punish her by telling a scary one, full of shadows and teeth, and then she'd have the nerve to fall right back to sleep. Instead, Korsica slipped down from the bed. Her nightgown whispered around her ankles, silver and white. Her feet were cold, and she eyed a pair of slippered boots, almost left them. It was easier to sneak around without the shuffle of shoes, before remembering that she didn't have to be quiet anymore. This was her castle. This was her home. She could be as loud as she liked. Korsica stepped into the shoes and padded to the window. Beyond, the moon was a white hangnail in the sky, and the river had taken on a pearly glow. At midday, you might not notice, but when the sun went down, it gave off a silvery shine like starlight. The first year, the whole castle had seemed to hold its breath, the soldiers waiting, hands on weapons for the inevitable fight. But there hadn't been any fighting. Korsica was presented to the city, and the city accepted her like a gift. Their little queen. No one had come forward to challenge her claim, at least not that she knew of. If there had been stealthy attempts, they hadn't gotten very far. People accepted her, she knew, because London was changing faster now, magic rushing back. Nazee could conjure water, and did so every chance she got. Korsica hoped magic wasn't the kind of thing that could run out, or Nazee wouldn't have any left by the time she turned 12. And it wasn't just the children.
Some of the grown-ups were getting magic too. Every day, there were more of them. Adults now able to conjure wind, or fire, water, or earth. And they all said it was connected to the old king and to her. And it had to be, didn't it? After all, she was the one who'd found him in the Silver Wood, even if nobody knew it. She was the one with the black eye, the mark of magic. And now people came to the castle every day wanting to see her, to touch her, to be blessed. They came, and sometimes the Ver let them go through, and sometimes they didn't. One day even her mother came, suddenly full of want. Her mother, who tried to sell her. She came, and for a moment, Korsica thought it was because she missed her daughter, wanted her back, but she didn't. She only wanted to be paid. The Ver kept her away after that. Sometimes, when she was falling asleep, she could still hear the coins on their kitchen table going clink, clink, clink. Korsica turned away from the window, surprised by how dark the room seemed now with the thin light of the moon at her back. She curled her fingers, and fire ignited in her hand. It was so easy. As easy as wanting. And she knew how to want. Other people struggled to conjure a flame. She struggled only to contain its size. The fire bloomed hot and bright, swallowing her fingers, and she held her breath and focused until it shrank back to candlelight, hovering just above her palm. Nazee slept on as she shuffled past the bed, heading for the doors. Most of the floor stones were smooth, but a few were patterned, and she liked to play a game, hopping between the marked ones until she reached the other side. She pressed her ear to the carved surface of the door, listened, and heard nothing, save for the hum of the wood against her palm, inviting her to take it, to bend it, to make it grow. She imagined it coming apart beneath her fingers, braiding itself into tendrils, into limbs, a tree. But she must have imagined it too hard because the door let out a splintering crack. And Korsica jerked her hands away and squeezed her eyes shut and imagined the door as a door and nothing more. When she opened her eyes again, it was still there. She pushed it open. A pair of soldiers stood on the landing beyond, dressed in armor so dark it seemed to swallow the light, making them blend right into the walls. She knew they were there, even if they didn't move, knew they weren't going to lurch forward and grab her. She knew, but she still walked a little faster until she was safely past them and onto the stairs. Let me just... Oh. Almost a year she'd lived in the castle, and Korsica still hadn't learned the whole shape of this place. She knew there were 4 towers, and she was in one. She knew her stairs led down and down and down, 3 landings and 3 floors. She knew that on every floor below there was a 4-sided wall that went all the way around, touching the towers and studded with narrow windows that looked out onto the city. She knew the 13 Ver stayed at the 2 floors beneath her, and that the bottom floor held the castle proper, with the throne room and half a dozen other halls, and also some of the guards. She knew there was another floor on the ground for the kitchens and the castle servants. She knew. But in the dark sometimes, she still got turned around, so she kept to the halls that bordered each floor, counted to make sure she touched all 4 sides and ended up back at her own tower. Tonight she miscounted. Or perhaps she didn't miscount. Perhaps she heard the whisper, or saw the light ghosting on the stairwell wall, and simply followed it by the tower steps, up the tower steps. And when she reached the top, she saw a Ver. In her mind, the 13 Ver were like little cold-cut statues. Nazee had used all of them more or less the same. Some were tall, and others short. Some dark-skinned, others pale. But in their silver armor and their half cloaks, the ring pin at their shoulders, they blurred together in her mind. Those chosen few, the members of the old king's original guard. This Ver stood before a kind of altar, a shrine placed before a door like the one that led to her own rooms. At first, she thought there was a second Ver in front of him, but then she realized it was a statue. A statue of the old king. His head was bowed, just like she found him in the silver wood. But here, he was on his feet, a crown resting on his stone temples. Korsica crept closer and saw that the altar in front of the statue had been draped in a silver cloak, just like the ones the Ver all wore. The same silver ring pin laying in its center. Candles stood around the ring, and she watched as the Ver lit them one by one and then knelt. She thought of the soldiers in the silver wood, the way one of them fell to their knees before the old king's body. This Ver didn't fall, but he sank slowly down and whispered, so softly she couldn't hear the words, only the breathy sound they made. And when he spoke again, it was to her. "Os, Korsica," he said, and she jumped, fingers tensing around the little light in her palm. It went out. The Ver rose and looked at her. His hair was thick and dark, taking over his face like a thicket. From the heavy eyebrows that looked like soot smudged across his brow to the beard that shadowed his jaw. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making devotions." Korsica drifted forward and studied the statue of the old king. From this angle, she could see the shine of two polished gems set into the stone face. One green gem, the other black. They stood together for several moments, and the Ver didn't talk. Korsica felt she shouldn't either, but questions had always made her tongue itch. Who was he? "His name," said the Ver, "is Holland Vozik." "Holland Vozik," she echoed. When she said it, she tasted the sugar cube melting on her tongue, felt grass tickling her fingers. She didn't know much about the man she'd found in the silver wood, only that she had gone to sleep, and something in her had woken up. "Tell me about him," she said, and even though she was the queen, she added, "Please." The Ver smiled. His gaze was still on the statue. "Have you heard the story of the someday king?" "Once there was magic," she told herself, "and it was everywhere." Korsica's fingers trailed along the castle wall as she spoke, reciting the story to the stones and the grass and the sky. She could feel the rocks singing beneath her fingers, feel the ground humming under her bare feet, which she knew wasn't fitting for a queen. She didn't care. She was alone, but of course she was not alone. She was never alone. A handful of Ver studied her from a balcony. The soldiers watched from atop the wall. Nazi glanced down now and then from a nearby tree where she was perched, reading a book on strategy and war. "Once there was magic," she began again. "It was everywhere, but it wasn't equal." Every night for the last month, she'd met Serac. That was the Ver's name. At the top of the stairs, and every night he told her the stories. And every day she told them to herself, until she knew them all, inside and out. Stories of the time before and the time after, of the other three worlds and what happened when they disappeared behind their doors, of the way magic was bound and the way it withdrew, of the way the world began to wither, of the many kings and queens who tried to force it back into the world and failed because they did not understand. A thing taken by force would always be a pale shadow of something given freely. Of the challengers who rose, all claiming to be the someday king, the legendary figure who would call the magic home, and how the magic refused them one by one because they gave nothing of themselves. and then of Holland Wozik. Holland, who did not want the throne, but helped his friend Vortalis to it. Vortalis, who was slain one night by Astrid and Athos Dane, who captured Holland and branded him with magic and bound him into service and made him wear the mark of his own capture on his cloak. Serac told her of the Danes, how they held the throne for 7 years before they too were killed, and Holland had disappeared, and when he returned, it was not as a servant, but as a claimant to the empty throne. How the few who stood against Holland fell like wheat beneath the scythe of his most devoted, Oika, who was a Ver before they were called Ver. And when he took the throne, how he did not try to force the magic, to bind it to him. It simply came. The river thawed, and a color flooded into the world like a blush into cold cheeks. And all knew then that Holland was the someday king. Up in her nearby tree, Nazi turned the page. She had heard all the stories by now. Corsica told them to her every night. And when she learned that Nazi had been there in the castle, that she had met Holland first as the servant and then as the someday king himself, well, she had wanted to know everything. What was he like? Corsica asked again. And Nazi looked up from her book. I didn't know him any better than you. But you saw him. And Corsica wanted to stay alive. And Corsica wanted to say alive. But she hadn't told anyone. Even Nazi of the day in the Silver Wood. She'd almost told Serac once. For all the stories he'd given her, she didn't have any of her own. She knew he'd believe her. It wasn't that. But that encounter felt like something that lived only between her and the dead king. A light cupped in their hands. She wanted to keep it there. How did he seem? She pressed. Nazi looked off into the distance as if trying to remember. At last, she offered up a single word. Lonely. She waited for the older girl to say more, but Nazi went back to her book, and Corsica drifted away from the wall in the tree and took up her story again, reciting it like a prayer, tracing the words as if they were a string, a ribbon, a road. And at some point, Corsica looked up and realized she had wandered around the side of the castle. She was standing at the edge of the statue court, and Anne was standing at the edge of the statue court. There was a gruesome sight, a stretch filled by the bound and twisted forms of the kings and queens who'd climbed to the throne and fallen from it. Serac told her they were only sculpted tributes, but Nazi insisted they were real people turned to stone. That the Danes had started the awful court to make an example of anyone who tried to stand against them. Corsica didn't know if Nazi was being truthful or just teasing, but she stopped before the twins. Astrid bound on her knees, Athos on his feet, being eaten by a massive snake. She leaned in and wondered if they were in there, caught forever at the edge of death. Which I think they actually did, if I remember, from the second book. There was no statue of Holland in the courtyard yet, but the space had been made, the path changed so that anyone who came through the gate and crossed the court to the palace stairs would be confronted by him. She looked around. She'd heard some call the statue court a garden. There were no flowers anywhere. The London air had warmed and the river no longer froze, but the castle grounds were still sparse, the ground unyielding. And Corsica had never seen a garden, not in real life, only in pictures and books of thick grass and wild blooms. And once, in a painting Serac showed her, a painting of the city the way it must have been before, in the times before. Corsica knelt and pressed her palms into the dark soil, remembering how the ground had felt beneath the old king's body, lush as velvet. She knew now that Holland's magic ran through her veins. She was his heir, and she wanted a garden. Korsica had no knife on her, but she searched and found a bit of broken stone and around and turned up earth, brushed away the dirt, and brought it to the inside of her arm. She pushed down, dragged the jagged edge across her skin until blood welled. It hurt, but it was supposed to hurt. Give and take, that was the nature of Antari magic. All she needed was the word. The spells had come to her strangely, not all at once, but one by one, appearing only as she needed them. So far, she had learned the words to open and to close, to light and to heal. To heal, the first Antari spell she'd ever needed. It had spilled out of her as Lark's blood poured through her fingers. To heal. That must be the one she wanted now. After all, what was she trying to do if not heal the ground itself? Something moved at the edge of her sight. Nazi had followed her into the courtyard, her voice drifting between the statues. "What are you doing?" she called out. Korsica was focused on the task at hand. She swiped her fingertips along her bleeding arm and drove both hands deep into the damp, dark soil. Hasari. She held her breath and waited for the spell to work, for the grass to grow, for the flowers to bloom, for the barren earth to change beneath her hands, but nothing happened. And yet, Korsica could feel the pull of magic, feel it being drawn out of her, down into the soil, and her head began to pound. Something was wrong. She tried to pull her hands free, but her body wouldn't move. Her bones locked in place and her pulse roared in her ears as the world reached up. Not the ground, but something deeper, and drove 100 hooks into her. Not skin, but something deeper. And it was too big. It was too big. It felt like being crushed, like her breath and her blood and her life was being squeezed out of her and eaten up. And she tried to scream too, but nothing came out. And the last thing she saw was the flash of silver armor and the flutter of a half cloak on a crown of dark hair, as Serac put his hands over hers and pulled them from the ground, and something tore inside her and everything went black. Korsica was back in the silver wood. She had been running from someone, something. It didn't matter who or what, because the moment she plunged between the trees, she knew they wouldn't chase her here, and knew that she was safe. And yet, her legs kept moving, drawing her deeper into the trees, heart pounding until she realized the pulse she felt wasn't in her chest, it was beneath her feet. She stopped then, knelt, and sank her hands into the soil and began to dig and dig and dig until her fingers closed around the beating heart and Korsica woke up. She was alone in bed. It was too big without Nazi in it, even with the pillows piled around her, and she didn't even remember lying down. But daylight was streaming through the windows, high and bright, and every part of her ached, from her skin down to her bones and deeper still, ached as if she'd been that hurt. And she wondered why. Korsica tried to sit up, but her limbs felt pinned down beneath the sheets, and a strange fear began to steal across her then. She was still dreaming, or worse, that she was dead. She pushed at the blankets, desperate to be rid of the weight. And then Vera Serac was there, at her bedside, silver half-cloak swaying. "Gently, my queen." His beard was longer than it had been that morning, and dark shadows pooled beneath his eyes as if he hadn't slept in days. That was odd. "What's wrong?" she croaked. Her throat was dry, and it took 2 tries to shape the question, and when she did, the Ver's dark eyes took on a shine. But when he spoke, it wasn't to her. She didn't realize there was anyone else in the room until he turned and said to someone she couldn't see, "Tell them she's awake." A door opened and then closed, and then Serac explained in the storyteller's voice what had happened, and that was how she learned that she had been asleep for more than a week. That they didn't know if she would die or wake or be forever trapped between the two. And it was more that Serac wasn't saying. She could see it in his eyes, or in the lack of them. The way he wouldn't meet her gaze when he said that the city did not know about her illness, that the Ver had been holding council trying to decide what to do. They had been planning for her death. And then the door flung open and Nazi was there, and she wasn't crying, but Kosika could see that she had been. The way her eyes were ringed with red, and that she flung herself against the bed, and the first thing she said, "What were you thinking?" And only then did Kosika remember sinking her hands into the barren earth. Remember the horrible pull as the hungry soil ate up everything she had to give. "I thought I could heal it," she said, feeling small and foolish as the words came out. Kosika should have known that when the world didn't offer up a spell, she should have known that its silence was a kind of warning. "Your power is strong," said Serac, "but even you have limits." "I had to do something," she said. "We have roused the magic from its sleep, but it is weak. I felt its need. I felt its thirst." "That may be," said Serac, "but there's not enough blood in your veins to water this world." Kosika sat up a little straighter. "And perhaps," she said, "we can water it together." Oh. So that's how the tithe was formed. The ritual was born. I actually kind of like that. The idea is novel, for sure. All right, that was part 3. Now, on to part 4. We're jumping back into the present day during the tithe that is currently going on. So, the tithe road ended at the Silver Wood. Around the grove, the people of London stood, gathered and waiting, their final bounty in their bandaged hands. It was a bag of seeds, the pouch spelled so that when planted with the rest, no matter the season, the seeds inside would grow. Another reminder of why they made this trek each season, of why they had been asked to bleed. The crowd seemed somber, and she wondered if word had reached them that the would-be killer in the square, if that was why they bowed their heads so low when their queen went by. Kosika walked into the waiting woods and paused, smiling up at the pale trees. Overnight, it seemed their leaves had turned from green to gold, begun falling in halos on the ground below. She made her way to where the third and final altar stood, not deep within the trees, but just inside the forest's edge, nestled among the silver trunks so that pale wood bled right into the pale stone. The third and final statue of Holland Bosig stood on a raised block flush with the basin, so that when the bowl was full, it was as it was now, he seemed to walk atop the blood instead of wading through it. He no longer wore his crown, but held it in his hands. His head tipped back, his gaze turned to the canopy and the waiting sky. A thicket of branches tangled around his cloak, so that he seemed part of the silver wood, or it part of him. "Once a servant," said Kosika, standing before the altar, "then a king." She drew her knife. At last, a saint. She made a third cut on the inside of her arm, the deepest yet, and watched her blood join the pool until it brimmed, threatening to overtake the edge. She stared down into the surface, waiting for it to smooth, and then touched the basin's glass side and said the words. The altar walls gave way, soaking into the roots of the silver wood, and the dark the dark stain spreading farther up her once white cloak. The third tithe done, the citizens began to turn away, retreating down the path and into the streets, making their way home. But Kosika lingered, her gaze trained on the trees ahead. 1,000 eyes stared back, unblinking, from the narrow trunks, and it was hard to think that she had ever been afraid of this place. She moved past the statue and into the woods. And now we're jumping back again 4 years ago. So wait, what I'm thinking right now is when Tess from Red London fixed the device, she accidentally created a portal to White London and talked to somebody in the woods. Did Tess meet Kosika before turning and like going back to her workshop? And this is now like playing like what happened in White London while that shit happened in Red London. I could think that would be the case. Maybe that'll be explained. We'll see. Anyway, 4 years ago now. Once there was magic, Serac began, and it was everywhere. Normally, the alcove burned with candles, but that night only one was lit. Its small, unsteady flame casting jagged shadows onto the walls and the statue and the Ver. Magic was everywhere, but it was not equal. As he spoke, his hand drifted, as it always did, to the seal at his shoulder, the silver cloak clasped, a ring driven through by a bar. It was the same seal that lay on the altar, and she knew now it was the same one Holland had worn when he served the Danes, the same one Athos burned into his skin to bind him. The Ver wore it to show that they had bound themselves to Holland's legacy. It burned like a hearth fire set in the center of a house, heating one room and then the next one, and so on. Its warmth and light growing weaker the farther it must reach. Black London was the first room, the one closest to the flame. And we were the next, and then 2 more followed after, farther from the heat but still within the house. Serac took a candle and set it on the altar. But the flame became too strong and Black London began to burn. He took up a lantern, and instead of standing near a hearth, our world now stood beside a conflagration. And so the worlds decided to close their doors to stop their fire spread. He set a lantern over the candle. Even after the fire was contained again, the people here were still afraid. The lantern had 4 thin glass walls, all of them open, but as Serac spoke, he began to close the sides. We looked out at our magic and feared it would grow too hot, too hungry. He closed the first side, and so we trapped it. He closed the second. We built cages. He closed the third. We bound it to us. He closed the 4th and final wall, trapping the flame within the airless glass. Do you know what happens to a fire when it's trapped? Kosika watched the light shiver and shrink. It goes out, she whispered. It goes out, echoed Serac, sadness heavy in his throat. Kosika could not take her eyes from the flame. She watched as the light began to thin, retreating from a tall flame to a short one, from gold to blue. Felt a twist of panic as the light retreated down the wick until it met the pool of wax and died. A thin tendril of smoke rose from the candle, clouding the lantern. For a moment they stood in silence in the full dark, and she held her breath and wondered if the lesson was done. But then Serac spoke again. Here's the difference, Kosika. Magic does not die. Serac lifted the lantern off the candle, setting it aside. Magic withdraws. It resists. He held his own hands out to either side of the extinguished candle, brows furrowing with the effort. It grows harder and harder to kindle again, but a small spark, a tiny flash of blue, and the flame slowly returns, small and fragile, but burning. And Serac smiled. That is what Holland did for us, he said, lowering his hands. What will you do? Kosika studied the solitary candle, its light barely reaching the walls. What will I do? She wondered, and then held out her hand, not toward the single burning flame, but 100 darkened candles lining the alcove. She flexed her fingers, and the tapers burst to life, fire sprang in a wave until the entire space blazed with light. I really like the imagery of that. Like, I really like how Serac used the fire imagery to get his point across, and being just like very much philosophical about, like, you know, this is how this all went down, and now it's your turn. What will you do? Will you be able to maintain this flame, make it prosper? Will it go out again? That is now your decision. And the way she responded by just lighting them all up, I really like this. The way they like that little part here with just Serac and Kosika. Beautiful imagery, very well done. I love that. All right, now we're jumping back into the present again. No one followed Kosika into the woods. Not her soldiers or her Ver. Not Serac or Lark. Not even Nazi. The silver wood was now a sacred site, and no one else was allowed to pass within. Her cloak dragged in her wake, snagging on the new growth until her fingers found the clasp. Came free, and a heavy cloth slid from her shoulders and pooled in her wake, and she continued on until she found the place where Holland had died. She knelt and ran her fingers through the grass that grew, as it always did, beneath the tree, as soft and green as the day she found him. Even after all these years, she'd never told anyone that she'd been there, the first to find the dead king's body. Perhaps the Ver would welcome the knowledge, see it as further proof to her claim to magic and the throne, or perhaps they would say that she'd taken his strength, stolen it from his cooling skin. Kosika didn't know and didn't care. The truth of that day, like the power in her veins, did not belong to them. Kosika drew her blade and made a fourth cut along the inside of her arm. A private tithe. Let the red drops fall like rain onto the patch of grass below the tree. She knew the right spell now, the Antari word she wanted in the courtyard the day she nearly died. As Athera, to grow. But she didn't say it, didn't need to. The golden leaves shimmered overhead, the roots ran strong and deep below, and they had been watered well. She rose and hauled the heavy cloak back over her shoulders, as beyond the woods, the drums finally stopped beating. It didn't end all at once, but trailed off like a slowing pulse, as word spread through the city that the ritual was done. Yo, Dark, what's up? Okay, so that was the end of chapter 5 already. 4, 5, 4, 5, 5. Yeah, we're now at 6. Guys, what do we do now? That was a short chapter. That was only like 5-6 parts. That was like a very short chapter. Let me see how many pages that was. That was like 33 pages. That was like an interlude chapter of just like, you know, meanwhile, in the other worlds, what's going on over here? So I don't know. Like I said, I wanna keep it usually now to 1 chapter a week, to not like drag out the reading sections for too long and make it like crazy long. But like, I don't know what to do now. Shall we start to read into chapter 6, or should we stop here for today? Should we stick by 1 chapter a week? I guess I can check how long the next chapter is, and then we can evaluate from there. So the current one we just read was 33. So we're starting at 305. Then we go all the way to 345. So this is going to be a longer chapter. It's going to be a 40-page chapter. We can do that next week. I think we're just going to keep it as usual and just move on for today with Genshin and other stuff. I don't know, because I feel like if we do the other 40, that would be too long, and I don't want to cut out like mid-chapter and then have it like off again, where like we have half a chapter into the next half of a chapter or something. It's hard to like, I don't know. Like, I love this book and I would love to continue reading, but I don't know how and when to stop now if we would like continue reading into the next chapter. Like, we could stop at like one of the parts again, being like, oh, we're only gonna read until like part 4 of chapter 6 or something, and then next time we're gonna start with part 5. But like, that is like gonna be so off for the next weeks, I feel. Unless like next week, I don't know, we're gonna finish chapter 6 and do chapter 7.
But I think we're just gonna keep it to one chapter a week. As much as I would love to continue reading. So I guess we're going over to Genshin. Let me just set everything up for it real quick. Man, it's crazy. Short reading chapter today. Time to wrap up event and suffer in Abyss. Yeah, hey, we have to do the new Abyss as well because that reset like a few days ago. That's gonna be fun. So there we go. Genshin Impact. Yeah, we're just gonna switch now. It's okay. We'll be doing more reading next week, obviously. But for today, we're keeping it shorter. I don't like to have to make a decision like that because, like, I could read on forever, but I also don't want to make the reading streams, especially like the reading part, because like I said, they also got to be uploaded to YouTube now. I don't want them to be like crazy long and indigestible and for people. So I want to keep it short, like 2-3 hours. We've been only live for 2.5, and I probably yapped for like half an hour, so we only done like 2 hours, for like an hour of reading or something like that. I don't know, but it is what it is. It's how we are now navigating this the reading streams. So it's simple for everybody. We go here, we go here, we do that, and then we open up this and start Genshin. Okay. Turn this on. Turn this down to like 0.8. There we go. Yeah, like, let me see. Yeah, we've been live for about like 2.5 hours, so like we've probably done like 2 hours of reading or something, which I think is not a bad amount of time. It just felt a bit short today compared to the other time. Just gotta adjust a few more little settings here. And then we can hop into some Genshin Impact. Let me see. We need to enable some more sound alerts again and stuff. And then we're gonna finish off the event, spend our resin, do the new Abyss and suffer. Maybe we'll hop over to some Honkai or play something else. Like we could try out Celeste maybe today, maybe Sifu, something like that. We have a lot of time. I'm not gonna go to sleep anytime soon, so we'll be here for a bit.
I see the value in my own work, but I also see the meaning in all the endeavors of the people of Fontaine.
The screen will go black
believe
for
I
a
will
second.
Continue to take pride.
1 sec.
There. And